But my beats, they are hard.
To the BCSN SportsWrap, Bryan Fulford and AD Drew, and joining us right now to get into a little conversation regarding the recent changes in the HBCU conference landscape and specifically the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. We've got Brian Simpkins joining us, not only the CEO and designer for his company, GrizzlyBlack Designs, but also been a contributing writer with HBCU Game Day. And more importantly, Brian has been, I don't know if you guys are following Brian out there on Twitter, been definitely posing some interesting thoughts and questions regarding the MEAC. And so, you know, obviously the past week has really been about FAMU and the SWAC. And now we start to maybe turn our focus towards looking at the MEAC specifically and all of the things that will come with their future, which, you know, any number of rumors and scenarios are out there. But Brian, welcome on to the show. Glad to have you here with us.
Thanks for having me. Longtime fan of BCSN. And it's just a really good thing to have Black sports media converging, especially at a time like this when we really need the support.
Yeah, appreciate that. Let me make sure to give out your Twitter handle so that way, you know, anyone who, you know, we'll definitely make sure to make mention of it again, but give out your Twitter handle so that way, you know, that's primarily where we've seen you, but any other social media plugs, let's get that out first.
So my Twitter handle is XIII_MR_UNDADOG.
All right, that's XIII_MR_UNDADOG, UNDADOG.
Yes.
So as Brian, as you have sort of seen events of the past week, let me first get your thoughts on the bold move by Florida A&M to move from the MEAC to the SWAC. What are your just initial thoughts on that first?
I feel like it was the right move, not only from a financial standpoint, but also from a geographical standpoint. The fact that FAMU had to basically go all the way up to Dover, Delaware, which is 15 hours. That's a killer when it comes to flight times and bus times, gas. It was just, you know, money that was burning away. The MEAC lost its Southern contingent after Savannah State had left a few years ago, and, you know, losing Hampton as well, lost the centralized part of the MEAC. So just rekindling these old SWAC rivalries with Alabama State and Alabama A&M, and of course the Southern rivalry, which is probably the most lucrative matchup they have going, that has the big buzz right now. They'll be crazy not to go to the SWAC.
Right. And so as you look at what is left now, Florida A&M leaving the MEAC follows right on the heels of, and essentially it'll be the same time that North Carolina A&T leaves the MEAC heading to the Big South.
Yep.
And so what that leaves the MEAC with, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think I've got the numbers right, it'll leave them essentially with 9 conference members, 7 conference members play football.
Yep.
And that'll go from as high as you mentioned, Dover, Delaware,
right,
all the way down to Daytona Beach, Florida, where Bethune-Cookman rests. And so, pretty much a straight, almost an I-95 run from one school down to the next. And so I guess so many thoughts here, but what's your immediate thought about, let's just talk about the survival of the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, and maybe, I don't know if you want to think about it from a football perspective, but I think that's always one of the biggest, things to consider. But, from the football perspective and just overall, what's your thoughts on the MEAC survival right there?
The MEAC
loaded
survival.
Question, I know, loaded question.
The main thing for the MEAC to sustain right now is to lock down their southern corridor. That helps Bethune-Cookman out significantly, and South Carolina State. When it came to analyzing who could fill a slot or two in, it was kind of hard. Like I said, Bethune-Cookman being so far down in Florida, it kind of complicated things a little bit. I really didn't have any Division I members that are already members that could fill that slot. The SoCon has things locked down. The Big South obviously has things locked down. We have a little scenario boiling around with the Atlantic Sun and this new UAC conference that will split into 2 separate conferences, and one will sponsor football and one won't. Fiscally for Bethune-Cookman, me personally, if I was Cookman, I would still keep the MEAC schools in mind when it comes to non-conference. But, dealing with COVID-19 and reduction of money and scholarships, they got to stay close to home as possible. That's just being realistic. So dealing with, if Cookman does stay, I did have a D2 giant out in Georgia, possibly in Valdosta State, who's just been dominant in about 3-4 different sports. They have over 11,000 students at their institution, and they have 6 men's sports and 7 women's sports. Child non-compliancy is a very big factor when it comes to moving up from one division to another, or just keeping your status at a certain division. They could very easily add another women's sport like bowling, and the MEAC would still keep its contingent going. Now, I also have, like I mentioned about Cookman possibly going to the Atlantic Sun or another Southernish conference for money reasons. A call up I definitely don't think people have thought about, but it's in the MEAC's footprint, is UNC Pembroke out in Pembroke, North Carolina. So based off of the travel mileage, they are less than 200 miles between South Carolina State and NC Central. Just only 2 hours worth of travel. You don't have to worry about spending the night, over the weekend in a certain town. You can get your students to a game and back. You don't have to worry about them missing class next morning, workouts, things of that nature. And the fact that the furthest out that they're dealing with in terms of football would be Morgan State. That's 6 hours and 20 minutes, 409 miles. That's very doable for a weekend trip. Like I said, that's less travel dealing with that I-95 corridor. That's something a lot of people don't really realize. The closer you are to these big interstates, the easier it is to travel from one place to another. Just like with how Savannah State had left, they were just conveniently right there, smack dab off of 95, just like Bethune-Cookman. If you have proximity to that interstate and you're centralized, you will be the best candidate out there.
Let me ask this, and I think AD, you touched on this as well, and Brian, hearing your first mention there of two teams or two schools, Valdosta State and UNC Pembroke, I feel like there's two different routes that the MEAC has to look at, and that's one, who else is out there that you can bring into the fold, and I think you have to realistically look at what other FCS schools for the financial synergy that comes with that. Because any other scenario, whether it's you looking at Division II schools to bring in, or, and AD, you've talked about this in your columns, the MEAC moving down to Division II, those require wholesale changes financially, reductions in scholarships, or addition to scholarships for somebody. Either way, there's money involved. Are both of you sort of in agreement that that's the two scenarios out there? And so if that's the case, is there a short list of FCS schools, first off, that makes sense?
Well, Brian, I'm going to take that a little bit further than you laid out that basic scenario. In my opinion, there has to be some type of combination of both. When you say FCS schools or Division II schools, you got to take that one step further. Do you look at maintaining a all HBCU conference, or such as what Brian has laid out, which is some of the scenarios that I've laid out? Do you look at PWIs or some combination of both? HBCU from D2 moving up, along with the PWI from FCS moving over, and even with COVID-19 out there, the possibility of some FBS schools moving back down to FCS. So a combination of all three of those things are some of the things that the MEAC needs to look at. And I'm not gonna get into any specific schools right now, because I'm gonna give Brian the opportunity to comment on that before I start laying out some different schools that I've looked at.
In terms of FBS reductions, so to speak, what kind of comes to mind would definitely be Coastal Carolina, being close to Myrtle Beach. You can definitely put a reach out possibly for Old Dominion. They have an established rivalry with Norfolk State for years. We got family members on both sides of that rivalry.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, did they share a stadium at one point in time?
They did.
They did. Yeah, they did. Foreman
Field.
Yep.
Field.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, that they got the history for each other. In terms of Florida, I really don't see anybody moving down. FAU and FIU, they're just too far out downstate. In terms of Georgia, possibly Georgia Southern. And probably the most controversial school out there probably would be Georgia State. One thing we haven't talked about in terms of just the contingency of media markets is Atlanta. Atlanta is the crown jewel for any HBCU conference to dominate. You can promote, you can market. There's a large HBCU alumni base for many schools in that area. The first one to conquer Atlanta, that's just new opportunities and more money you can have on the table. So Georgia State, long shot, but hey, it'll be good for Dennis Thomas to reach out to them.
Do either of you, let me ask this, the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, founded in 1971. So we're coming up on
1970 first. They first played competition in 1971, but they
so we're talking about Right. So we're
years.
talking about 50 years.
Right.
50 years coming up on the 50th anniversary.
Yep.
Does it, and I don't know through any comments that maybe you, Brian, or you, Drew, have heard from alumni of Howard, North Carolina Central, South Carolina State, Delaware State, Morgan. The thought of being an HBCU conference and what that means for 50 years. Now we're faced at the possibility of that uniqueness is probably going to change, or if you're going to survive, there's a strong likelihood it'll change. Does it sit uneasy with either of you, or maybe as you guys have heard from alumni, does it bother anybody out there? I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of wondering about that.
I'll go
Yeah,
first.
go ahead first. Yep.
No, we have 2 Division II conferences that have PWIs as prominent members of their conference. Spring Hill is a prominent member of the SIAAC, who is a PWI in Mobile, Alabama, and Chowan in the CIAAA. And let's keep in mind, the only reason Chowan left the CIAAA, I won't say the only reason, but the major factor in Chowan leaving the CIAAA was the fact that CIAAA stopped sponsoring baseball.
Yep.
And Chowan is a big powerhouse on the Division II level in baseball. So without having baseball as a conference thing, a conference for their baseball, that's what they started exploring other conferences. And by all means and purposes, they've left the CIAAA except for football. That's the only sport they used to play in the CIAAA. So no, it does not bother me to have one.
Bother you? May not bother you. I'm talking about alumni though of those schools.
Well, it should not bother. I think if anything, it would bother the alumni of the PWI more than it would bother us, because we're gonna go watch our kids play no matter where they play. You can schedule a game on the moon, and if the moon has a beach or somewhere for us to hang out and party at or tailgate at, we're going to catch that first flight to the moon to go to that football game. And I do not mean the Moon nightclub in Tallahassee, Florida, when I say that, Brian. So, Bryan Fulford. So, you know, but you understand what I'm saying. The question is, will those PWI institutions still go and come to a Howard, travel to a Morgan State, travel to a Delaware State for a football game? And usually once they travel to those games and understand the atmosphere and get with that atmosphere, and they see that band 1 or 2 times, usually those people come back because we don't bite.
Right.
So I'll turn it over to you, Simpkins.
I feel the same way. In order to innovate, you have to adapt on the fly. Geography just plays a huge role. You just gotta make sure that you take care of your centralized area. And I have heard from a few fans dealing with Howard, Norfolk State, Morgan State. They are a little concerned.
As they should be.
As they should be. You know, they've been the anchors for a long while, actually, since the conference inception. But me personally, I don't mind PWIs being in the conference. If that means the MEAC stays and doesn't disband, if that's what it takes, I'd like for that to happen.
Yeah. And in my opinion, both Brian's, the MEAC is going to have to make a real tough choice. And looking at it, and we talked about geography, the tough choice is this. First of all, they have to add team. No doubt about that, if the MEAC is going to survive long term. Where they add those teams is going to be the tough choice. Do they show up that northern cluster, as I called it, with those 6 schools in the north, Delaware, Howard, Morgan, Coppin, Maryland Eastern Shore. Did I leave somebody out there? Simpkins.
Do you have a Dale State, Morgan, Coppin?
Delaware State. I left Delaware State out. Got those six. All six of those schools are within a 4-hour ride of each other. It's less than 4 hours from any of those schools to the other. Do you stay and just make this a Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference like it originally was, and show up some other schools like you mentioned, the Old Dominion or schools in that area, and drop the South, North Carolina Central, South Carolina State, and Bethune, and say thanks for coming. Here's your parting gift. Or, like you say, do you try to get into the state of Georgia, the Carolinas, and get that southern portion back, where you have to add 3 to 4 schools to show up the South, where if you concentrate on the North, you've only got to add 1 to 2 schools to the North to stabilize the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. That's what's going to be the toughest decision. And a couple other schools that you did not mention, because all those schools that you mentioned were some of the same schools I had on my list. Kennesaw State in Atlanta, also in Marietta, in Kennesaw, Georgia. Yep. Charleston Southern is another school that should be considered. Then you've got, if we're talking Division II schools, that's in the South, Albany State is would definitely be one, and you even have to look at a Tuskegee or Morehouse, even though they would be the smallest schools coming into the conference. Both of those schools have to. All 3 of those schools that I mentioned, Albany State, Morehouse, and Tuskegee, have to do some upgrades to their facilities to get to that FCS level. Obviously, they have to add more money into their athletic budget. Morehouse and Tuskegee are private schools. They have to deal with that hurdle. Albany State is one of those schools that can't use state funds for athletic purposes, so they have to deal with that hurdle. So there are a lot of different hurdles to look at. When you look at the schools in the North, Virginia State, the largest school in the CIAAA, Virginia State will come in as the 3rd largest school in the MEAC if they were to come in with over 7,000 students.
Yep.
Bowie State, over approaching 6,000 students. So
and growing.
Those are 2 largest states. And if you look at a school in the Carolina, Winston-Salem had their cup of coffee.
Yeah.
What about a Fayetteville State with approximately 4,500 students? So just a few other schools to throw out there that the SIAC the MEAC should be looking at.
That's that. The Division II HBCUs, they probably have the largest hurdle of all. That $1 million transitional fee to Division I, that's just way too much for many schools. As you said, Virginia State and Bowie State, they're probably the 2 best candidates, or they're the closest to fundraising to meet that mark, to join the MEAC one day. But just realistically, dealing with COVID-19 and its aftermath, the MEAC has to get creative with who they bring in. Like I said, I don't want to see it go, but I do have some scenarios where if the MEAC does disband, how can the respective Black college conferences boost themselves up and promote themselves?
Yeah. Let me throw these 2 other schools I forgot to leave out: West Virginia State, and Kentucky State. Also, Kentucky State would close enough in the footprint where it would not be a big stretch for them. The biggest stretch for Kentucky State would be if those southern schools remain. Right. And West Virginia State obviously is just outside the footprint, but it's close enough where you could do something with those schools. And both of those schools have decent enough population. Sorry to cut you off on that.
It's all good. Yeah, I've even mentioned West Virginia State and a few of my CIAAA realignments. They were a former member, them in Virginia Lynchburg, and even Bluefield. But like I said, the MEAC, there's Thomas. He has a lot on his plate right now as his conference commissioner. And also I would question what is the mindset of the respective MEAC presidents. In order for the conference commissioner to have his powers, the respective presidents have to grant that to them. So it's not just on the MEAC commissioner, but the presidents collectively have to be on the same accord in terms of research. Who do they feel like can possibly be the best candidates to fill up these holes? Losing 5 schools within the past 10 years, that's a hard thing to deal with at the small college level, especially if you're FCS.
So let's talk first about survival of the MEAC. And Brian, if you are, if we're giving you commissioner duties, maybe in sort of order, if we're giving you the role of being the commissioner of the MEAC, who or what are your first priorities in order to, go ahead.
My priorities is the upper mid-Atlantic. That is the largest contingent for the conference. So you're dealing with Delaware, Maryland, DC, and Virginia. North Carolina can be included, depending on how things go, but South Carolina and Florida, those are just 2 states that are just way far out of travel reach, dealing with the budgets. I know, SC State and Bethune-Cookman fans, they might give some flack for it, but realistically, they should leave the conference for something that's a lot more close to home.
SIAC, CIAAA.
Yes.
Wait a minute. You're saying what? South Carolina? What? You're saying South Carolina State, Central, and Bethune-Cookman.
Central, I think Central, you said, was kind of the borderline.
Right. Central could stay realistically. South Carolina State, they have an option if they want to stay in the Division I conference. The Big South would definitely be a nice area, or a combination of that Atlantic Sun Conference, which still has this crazy scenario going on, or the UAC. And if they do drop to Division II, which is they'll probably make more money with, SIAC, well-established rivalries you're dealing with. Same thing for Bethune-Cookman. And the angle of Edward Waters possibly getting their things together to join Division II would just only help Bethune-Cookman even more. They'll have a travel partner. Going from Orlando to Jacksonville. That's a bonus for them. So Central, I know they're joint to the hip to North Carolina A&T and North Norfolk, as they say from down there. They're still kind of joined with Hampton, even though they don't like each other. The Big South will probably try to court them realistically.
They'd be smart. That'd be a smart move, wouldn't it? If for the Big South to instantly try to court North Carolina Central and probably Norfolk State, wouldn't it?
Yes. I see it happening. It probably has already happened. The question is, who else do they poach after? They could possibly go for Howard, but that's too much travel for Howard. If Howard did have to leave to another D1 PWI conference, Patriot League, they don't do scholarship football.
They tried the Patriot League at one point in time, and I think the Patriot League rejected Howard from what
them in Hampton. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Them in Hampton. And there was this talks of a possible Atlantic Sun Atlantic 10. Them trying to go to the Atlantic 10 and getting shot down, and just reevaluating your options from there. So staying in the MEAC was beneficial to them.
Let me ask either of you this question real quick. We've mentioned the $1 million that it would take for a Division II school to move up. For a school moving down from FCS Division I to Division II, let's say a school that has 16 different sports. I mean, is there any, other than the loss of scholarships or reduction in scholarships for football, you don't have to get rid of any sports, do you?
Nope. No. You can have
you can have more than the minimum. You just have to have the minimum.
Right.
Okay. And even if the league that you go into may not have some sports, which is likely, you just have to kind of find your way into some other either independent or.
That's why they call them associate members.
Right.
Associate member. Okay.
Like UAB is associate member of. And here's another thing: the MEAC needs to look at their associate members and see if they could get their associates to come over full time. You've got UAB, you've got Monmouth, and you've got Augusta University. They are associate members. Two of them in bowling, one's in golf. I may have that backwards as far as the sports that they are associate members of. But why not start in-house? Start with their cousins who sleep on your couch every night, because that's what those schools are. Those are those cousins who sleep on your couch every now and then. Hey, you want to go ahead and help pay these bills? Go ahead and move in. Those other options for the MEAC. And I'm gonna throw this one on because this was just sticking out to be like a sore thumb. Brian Simpkins. What about the team on the hat that you got on your head? What about them?
How about them Firebirds?
Being considered. Seriously.
Oh,
back to Commissioner Simpkins. Where are we going here? Next step in the MEAC revival or survival, I should say.
Man, like I said, there has been a few scenarios flying around about the MEAC not sponsoring football, but still staying in the Olympic and basketball conference, which that can still happen. Possibly a football merger with the Big South, which would bring a lot of money. You keep those well-established rivalries going, and you don't have to worry about huge travel for cross-divisional games. But like I said, the MEAC does not want to lose that stream of revenue. And the big elephant in the room right now is the Celebration Bowl. There has not been a contract renewal announcement yet from either the SWAC or the MEAC. I know Commissioner McClellan mentioned something about that the other day, them trying to renegotiate the MEAC SWAC challenge. That's going to play a large part down in Atlanta. And just honestly, the fact that they have not made an announcement has only complicated things. I'm very concerned about the MEAC. Very, very concerned. Like I said, the office has to get their stuff together. But if I was commissioner, Bethune-Cookman in South Carolina State, they'll just have to leave and just start looking at the Northeastern Corridor. I know, like you said, Monmouth out in Long Branch, New Jersey, they could, possibly be a member. NJIT, which is has a weird situation with the Atlantic Sun.
New Jersey Institute of Technology, for those who
yes,
don't know.
yes, out there in Newark. Yeah, out there in Newark, the Highlanders. NJIT, they are on a island and they're just hemorrhaging money right now. To have something a little bit more close to home would help them out significantly. And the MEAC does have large alumni populations within that New York, New Jersey area. So, that's another possible market. In the Philadelphia market, you may be able to garner out if you get, two schools of that nature. But like I said, they don't. Well, one has football, the other one doesn't have football. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you're NC Central or Norfolk State, you have to think of, hey, do I want to take that 5-6 hour trip to Jersey and play games every once in a while? You know, and then your Olympic sports, that, you know, that's something they'll have to evaluate.
It beats that trip down to Daytona Beach.
Yeah, it's a lot cheaper.
let me ask this as it relates to the MEAC survival.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Kever's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KEAVERSVOICE.com. Kever's Voice, Kever's Voice, KeversVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
I'm gonna give you 2 different years, 2021 and 2022, and this is for both of you. On a percentage scale, what's the likelihood that the MEAC still exists in 2021 and the likelihood that the MEAC still exists in 2022? Brian, I'll go to you first.
2021, I would say about 65 to 70%. 2022, less than 20%. Less than 20%. It's going to be a Hail Mary for them to have all the ducks in a row to stay at conference by 2022. I just don't see it.
AD?
Watch the negotiations with ESPN.
Yes.
If they get everything straight with ESPN and re-up the challenge and or the championship bowl for another 3 to 5 years, it's 100%. The MEAC will survive. Well, the contract negotiations come up this year.
Yep.
So 2021. If they sign the ESPN contract, it's 100% for both years. If they sign the ESPN contract, they're going to have what they need to survive. Because if they sign an ESPN contract, considering that there is larger pieces of the pie, hey, we don't have to charge a entry fee to whoever's coming into the conference because we've got this ESPN money over here. We're gonna let you come in for free right now because you're taking part of that FAMU and North Carolina A&T cut that would have been there, and just let them come in for free.
That's good you mentioned that. On Twitter the other day, I posed a question similar to that. Can you subsidize the Celebration Bowl money or the exit fee money from, you know, the previous members in the MEAC? Can you subsidize that to help a Division I or Division II school come into the MEAC? I'm not sure if that's legal or not, but if that is legal,
what happened? And I think listen to the FAMU presentation and talk to McClellan with the interviews with the SWAC. The monies that they're charging North Carolina A&T and FAMU, those schools are actually not paying that money out of their pocket.
No,
they're withholding that money for the monies that they normally receive.
Yep.
From knowing just general contracts and everything like that, if they pass a resolution, the presidents or whatever athletic directors, whoever has to pass a resolution to reduce the fee, just like they have the clause in there where you have to stay on the schedule for 4 years.
Right.
That's not going to be enforced. They could reduce that fee from say it's a $500,000 entry fee to $100,000 or something like that. You've already got $500,000 coming from two institutions that you're gonna keep in the bank this year. Assuming that you get this MEAC this ESPN contract, you've got even another revenue stream coming to put into the bank. You have money to help these teams get to the next level. Okay, another thing, move whoever comes in once they get to the scholarship level, move them up on the MEAC SWAC challenge ladder so that they get that extra payout.
Right.
You know, you're still gonna have your classics. You know, you're still gonna have your money. So why not do the FAMU model and Bethune model? Own your own classic. These are own their own classics, own their own events. You know, a battle of the bands or something. You know, you saw yesterday where they sent out where they're reducing the number of teams going to the tournaments. In the basketball tournament, first round will be at home. They're following the SWAC model and the GCAC model, but the first round will be at home, and only 4 teams will be going to, I believe it's Norfolk this year, where they are having a tournament.
They should have long done that. It's crazy that they hadn't done that prior to this year, or COVID-19, I should say. And
in the Olympic sports, it's cut down to 4. Only the top 4 are going to the tournament. In all the Olympic sports, they've got a couple other things. Golf is gone from 3 days to 2 days, and just a few other cost savings measures. So the MEAC realizes what they're doing, and first thing is get your house in order. They save it as money right now, which is a very smart thing. Now, it's one thing to put the money in the bank, or do you invest your money? The biggest thing the MEAC can do is invest the money in another school, helping another school, be it a Division II HBCU, be it a Division II PWI, be it another FCS, or be it an FBS that's coming down for budgetary reasons. Welcome them into the conference, waive those fees, or give them the quote-unquote, we all HBCU college students, we all know about them payment plans. Wait on your financial aid check to come in, give a payment plan, wait on their money to come in. Whatever they need to do, the MEAC needs to do everything but give away the farm.
And I'll take it one step further. With some of the prospective schools that we named earlier, they have some sports that the MEAC does not sponsor, or some MEAC schools already have, but the MEAC just doesn't sponsor as a conference. Like, for instance, my favorite sport, lacrosse.
Women's soccer.
Women's soccer. The fact that South Carolina State already has a women's team, Delaware State has a women's team, Howard has a women's team. You bring 2 or 3 more schools that sponsors that sport, that can be an official sport. Even in terms of lacrosse.
You have to have 6 according to
you have to have 6 for Alabama to the NCAA tournament. Even with lacrosse, which I push heavily for, on the women's side, you already have Howard and Dell State. Getting those New Jersey schools involved, that's not going to be too much extra out of their pocket. It helps with your Title IX compliancy, and it could inspire some schools to try to add a men's sport if it is financially feasible. But to promote women's sports, and to have a new demographic that you can appeal to, especially coming from a HBCU background, that would be huge. And we've kind of lacked these conferences outside of SWAC women's soccer. We've lacked that. That is a soccer is a low-cost sport, extremely low-cost sport. Scholarships, aren't really that much. And, you combine local talent with international talent, you can have something. It's not a foreign concept for a HBCU to win a national championship in soccer, like Howard University. or just be nationally ranked, like how Alabama A&M and Morehouse used to be. But like I said, you know, outside of revenue sports like basketball and football, you do have to take the non-revenue sports to mind.
So let's do this. Let's sort of transition a little bit from the MEAC survival. And I think, you know, hearing both of you, you know, Brian, when your percentages and AD, yours sort of based on what happens with the Celebration Bowl. Brian, one of the scenarios I saw from your feed was actually now looking at if the MEAC moves down into Division II. You had some.
Where have we heard that idea before?
Yeah. You had some very interesting thoughts on conference realignment, and as it relates to more of these teams moving into sort of a synergy with the CIAAA. So I'll kind of let you share your thoughts on what that looks like.
Okay. So there is a chance that, like I said, some of the MEAC schools will still stay Division I, but they'll go to the PWI conference, like, for instance, Howard, NC Central. Both of them, Bethune-Cookman, South Carolina State. So just the rest, Delaware State, Morgan State, Maryland Eastern Shore, Coppin State. They can very easily come back home to the CIAAA, and the buzz behind these old regional rivalries can bring a lot of money. So, like, for instance, I had a 18-team CIAAA situation. You would have in the North Division, Lincoln, Pennsylvania, Delaware State, Maryland Eastern Shore, Coppin, Morgan State, Bowie, and then something that should have happened a very long time ago, UDC joining the CIAAA. Then you still keep Virginia Union and Virginia State. That's your North Division. That's like a DMV-centric conference. That is 2.5 or less hours of travel. They're just so geographically compacted with each other. And then the South Division would essentially stay the same. You just move Elizabeth State to the South Division. You could keep Chowan, as a football member. It's totally, totally up to them.
Well, Chowan balances out Claflin.
Okay.
Because Claflin does not offer football.
Right. So they even out. So you can keep that alignment going. And like I said, it's super geographically based. You because you have more divisional teams now, that's less cross-divisional games and less travel you have to do. So, like, for instance, for Lincoln being all the way near Philly, they don't have to come to North Carolina as often. That that's extra money and gas in their pockets. And likewise for Claflin, being in South Carolina, they don't have to come 7-8 hours to the upper Mid-Atlantic area, to play games. That's that helps the schools out. There are just certain rivalries that people really want, and when we talk about revenue and budgets, give the people what they want. They will come. You can just market it, like gangbusters. My most controversial realignment scenario is my 20-team scenario. So, say for instance, without Bethune-Cookman and South Carolina State, all the rest of the MEAC comes to the CIAAA. North Division would be Lincoln, Delaware State, Maryland Eastern Shore, Coppin, Morgan, Bowie State, Howard, UDC, Virginia Union, Virginia State, Norfolk State. That's probably the first HBCU Superconference that we've ever had, more than likely. Just Morgan Bowie, that rivalry, that's a very prominent rivalry up this way. PG versus Baltimore, Norfolk versus Virginia State. Big state, little state. Those dynamics, and even with UDC, even though we don't have football, we have connections to Virginia State and Virginia Union. We typically go out of our way to try to schedule them. So, we try to have these well-established rivalries, and of course, across border rivalry with Bowie State, being in PG County and us in DC. A lot of our students, we interact with each other, and when we play each other in basketball, we pack the house out, so the ability to have that in the North Division would be cool. South Division, Elizabeth City, NC Central, Shaw, St. Aug's, Winston-Salem, Livingstone, Johnson Smith, Fayetteville, and again, Claflin. All Carolinas Conference, moneymaker. You bring Central back, Winston-Salem, they will be very happy. Johnson C. Smith would definitely be happy being in Charlotte, with the alumni basis for Central. They'll definitely put their money to support their teams out there. And the football alignment is just perfect. Like for that situation, if you kick Chowan out in terms of football, you got Lincoln, Delaware State, Morgan, Bowie, Howard, Virginia Union, Virginia State, and Norfolk in the North Division. And then South will be Elizabeth City, NC Central, Shaw, St. Aug's, Winston-Salem, Livingstone, Johnson Smith, and Fayetteville. And you can have protected cross-divisional games, so you can preserve those rivalries. That is a 7-game divisional schedule, and you get to pick, or have a rotational basis of, all right, what extra 2-3 teams I'm gonna have in my conference schedule, then my conference championship game, and then you still have, like I said, 2 or 3 out of conference games you can negotiate. If you can't find competition from other D2 conferences or other D1 conferences to play, you can play another CIAAA school and have it count as a regional game for the NCAA tournament, but it's not a conference game, which the CIAAA has been doing for the past few years. Some say it's a bad thing. Others say it's a good thing because it keeps the money in the HBCU's pockets. I would like to see it happen if the MEAC cannot get things together. That 20-team alignment I mentioned, that could bring a lot of money to the table.
Yeah, I think if I could jump in and just for numbers' sake, AD, as you were describing it, and I'm looking at it, the 20-team alignment, 16 of those teams have football programs. So, as you said, and I noticed and I don't know, you mentioned Virginia State in the North, but I also saw you kind of had them in the South Division. But however I don't know which Virginia is closer to the North or the South. I'd have to kind of look at a map. But you could realistically, as you mentioned, not only having this 20-team alignment here, but you're also giving, as you mentioned, a super conference in football. And you can even choose to go 1 or 2 routes. Like some Division II schools play an 11-game schedule, and the majority of that schedule consists of their own conference, and there's no championship game. Or you could do what you currently do, which is you play 10 games and everybody reserves the 11th as the championship game. Now, I don't know, financial feasibility and things like that. Does that make sense? I don't know. But it definitely would be appealing in your scenario that you have where it almost be truly you come out of the North and you may never play the team in the South.
Yeah.
You know, imagine Bowie coming out of the North and having never played anybody on the other side. But there's Winston-Salem State, for example, coming out of the South. Now, there's your true North Division versus South Division.
Yep.
You know, Bowie versus Winston-Salem. I know it might create some drama when it came to regions and who would go to the playoffs and things of that nature. But in terms of keeping everything in-house and, as you mentioned, generating revenue, I think it's an awesome idea. After hearing you explain it and then looking at it, it's an awesome concept.
Also, there was one more thing I wanted to mention. If you keep, you know, whether it's the 18-team alignment or the 20-team alignment, that also increases the chance of more HBCU teams making it to the NCAA tournament. We've had times like last year with Virginia State getting left out of the D2 football tournament. They needed just a little extra push, you know, even though they were behind one game behind Bowie to not make the CIAAA championship game. But they very well should have been, you know, possibly in the tournament if
but they actually got kicked out by Miles.
By Miles, right? That was the earned access.
Qualified, yeah, the earned access by being the number 9 seed, where Virginia State was a number 8. So obviously somebody had to go.
Right.
Oh, number 7, excuse me.
You could even argue that North Division and that 20-team alignment, they could break away and become their own conference. So now you will have 3 Division II HBCU conferences. That's more HBCUs in the NCAA tournament and a better chance for us to win national championships. You know, you could have a out-of-conference scheduling agreement, like you have these different challenges to fill out your schedules. And you keep it within the HBCU community. You give the fans what they want. They will pay the money. You can get you know, this more sponsors, you know, like your Food Lines has the CI has. I have noticed, I'm not sure if y'all know this or not, there were a few CIAA football games, and I think most of the basketball tournament was not just shown on Aspire TV, which they have their contract through. Up here in the Mid-Atlantic region, we got NBC Sports Washington, and we were actually able to see some of those CIAA broadcasts on NBC Sports, which I'm not sure if the CI has like an affiliate deal or they just, you know, wanted to get more content, but that was innovative to actually go on the TV and see a game on broadcast TV like that. Not everybody has Aspire.
Most people don't have Aspire.
Most people don't have Aspire. But NBC Sports, especially NBC Sports Washington, which goes from like Delaware to North Carolina, more people, that's more access. More people can watch that than Aspire. So if you can get some sort of affiliate deal, kind of like how ESPN does with the MEAC and SWAC, and then
basically regional. Those are regional deals because Aspire is technically a regional deal, national regional, and then you have, like you said, NBC Washington, and I'm sure you maybe go to some other cable network that would be able to or want to show those games as well.
Right.
You know, Simpkins, the only hole I see in your plan with the CIAA is SC State, South Carolina State. And the reason I have always said it makes sense for South Carolina State, if they go down to go to the CIAA instead of the SIAC, where they came from once upon a time, is look at the school right around the corner from them.
Yeah.
Claflin is literally around the corner from South Carolina State. So why not have this be a conference game?
But does that make how many times? I mean, really, you already have a footprint in that city with one conference. Does it really make sense to have 2 teams in the same city in one conference.
Ask SIAC with Morehouse and Clark.
Yep. Or in my scenario, Howard and UDC, both being in the district. You know.
All right, good. All right, good. Okay, I got you. You got you on that one. All right.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
No, you got a good point.
Prairie View and Texas Southern are really Metro Houston.
Yep.
All right. I submit. You got it.
I have in me the ability to make you a better you. So if you work hard, focus, stay on point, you can do anything. Trust me.
We made this track to tell everybody they can follow their dreams.
The Creole seasoning is a sodium-free and sugar-free blend that's versatile enough to put on anything. One of the first blends I developed more than 8 years ago, the Creole seasoning has an unmistakable aroma, a bold flavor, and a little heat for character. Every time I open one of these bottles, I hear trumpets and big band music.
What's your take, AD? What's your thought on the Brian's 2020 team CIAAA expansion there?
I like it. A lot of those ideas are some of the same ideas I put out in the article that I put out in early April. Once again, what happens at SC State? What happens to Bethune? Because we still have not tackled the question of Bethune out there on that island in Daytona Beach, Florida. Does Bethune remain a Division I school? Or do they drop down to Division II, go to the SIAC, where it makes the most sense to go to the SIAC, but you have the luster of being an FCS school? And if Bethune goes down to a Division II school, does that take anything away from the Classic? That FAMU and Bethune own that Classic. Everything is split 50-50. Does FAMU throw its weight around and say, hey, we the Division I team, y'all the Division II team, maybe we need to go 55-45. I'm just throwing stuff out there. I don't think it would happen, but these are things that could possibly happen with that. That was the big thing with the Turkey Day Classic between Alabama State and Tuskegee. Alabama State, number one, it was their home game, but number two, they were the division school, so they had the upper hand when it brought money. But Tuskegee had on their side, when we don't play the Turkey Day Classic, you make no money. And when they dropped Tuskegee from the Turkey Day Classic, they lost money. It's
well, look,
the three largest.
Let me ask.
Hold on, let me get to that. The three largest attendance events in Alabama State's new stadium all occurred in Tuskegee games.
Look, let me say this about Bethune-Cookman. If among the three schools, South Carolina State, North Carolina Central, Bethune-Cookman, I firmly believe the team that has the school that has the most value is Bethune-Cookman. Okay, one, because they're in Florida. Okay, two, and that should be attractive. I'm just looking at the footprint, for example, of the SoCo, the Southern Conference. Okay, which was one of the conferences I believe that might have been used in the study to determine FAMU going to the SWAC. Right. Also, we talked about the ASUN as another conference. So whether it's the ASUN or the SoCo, one of those conferences should be calling up Bethune-Cookman right now saying, and I say that because, one, you've got a strong football program. You've shown to have a very strong basketball, men and women's program.
And baseball.
And baseball.
Dominate baseball.
And baseball. They've done well. I mean, so athletics, the band, the historical value of it. I hate the maybe I don't know enough about South Carolina State, North Carolina Central, so apologies to those universities and those fans. But in terms of what I've seen on the field and court, Bethune-Cookman, I believe, has a higher value to the SoCo and the Atlantic Sun than those other schools. And I think that is why they would think to stay FCS and not move down to D2.
Right. I don't have my notes in front of me, and maybe Brian may have them, but one of those conferences has 4 other schools in the state of Florida.
That would be Atlantic Sun.
That would be the Atlantic Sun. Yeah.
North Florida, 2 others, yep.
And the A-Sun has a weird agreement with the Big South for football and everything else, which, interestingly, would still bring in North Carolina Central, Hampton on a rotational basis. Yep. So you still get to rekindle some of those old MEAC rivals. You still have the Florida Classic.
Yep.
And with a Edward Waters moving up to Division II and Savannah State still right there, you could play one of those 2 schools on a rotational basis for a good money game, because right. you know, with both of those being right on I-95, Edward Waters just over an hour away, Savannah State 2.5 hours away. Right. You know those fans are going to travel to Daytona and vice versa. So that's a good home-and-home series to have with those schools. So now you showed up some of the financial issues. You got those other 4 schools in the A-Sun within the state of Florida. You got some Georgia schools and South Carolina schools. That, in my opinion, is the perfect scenario for Bethune remaining a Division I school.
And it also helps out their baseball program, which can be arguably their biggest marketing tool outside of football and basketball. I actually ran the numbers and went on the MEAC site. Bethune-Cookman's baseball team has 19 MEAC titles, which is first place all time for MEAC baseball. They have known to try to pull off a few upsets in the regular season. And whenever they do go to the NCAA tournament, they do try to put up a fight within the first round. You know, they have the potential to try to pull like what Coastal Carolina did with their baseball program and make a deep run in the national tournament. And, you know, as we know, the further you go in the tournament, that's more revenue you're bringing to your school and the conference.
Not only that, but that's more recruits who are going to be looking at you for years to come.
Exactly.
Which is part of why they had that 19-year run. And correct me if I'm wrong, they made it deep into the tournament during 1 or 2 of those years doing that big run that you're talking about.
Right. I think they would like 1 loss shy of making the NCAA Super Regionals, if I remember correctly. And it was a tough time, and they gave, you know, Miami fits. They gave them fits. I remember that very fondly. And even in terms of South Carolina State, a lot of people don't know they have 14 MEAC championships in football. That's the most in MEAC history, surprisingly. To keep a brand like that in your contingency, that's essential. But in terms of Cookman, A-Sun, or, you know, the UAC situation, or the Big South,
I don't see the Big South.
Yeah,
I don't see the Big South.
Yeah, you know, A-Sun, that's probably their best bet to stay close to home, and you could still play. Like I said, that classic. I've also pitched an idea dealing with these invitational style neutral site HBCU football classics like Circle City, Chicago Football Classic. We need to do a better job in terms of predetermined games instead of waiting until the schedules come out and then a month later try to, you know, put the money up and say, hey, all right, we want you to come to such and such classic. Like Circle City Classic for Bethune-Cookman was a really big deal a few years ago when they played Howard. It was on the anniversary. To have every once in a while, one of those big time neutral site games out of town, that would make a lot of money.
Well, I think part of that is conference schedules. I
Right.
think if the Florida Classic's able to work when it is, and when it's going to be because it's part of the conference schedule.
Right.
Unfortunately, and if I'm wrong, I'm going to apologize in advance, but I don't believe, for example, the MEAC has the next 3 years scheduled out for conferences. It should.
Yeah, you might as well throw it away though.
Well, right, but they should. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you have to. I think it would make sense to have a 3-year out window so that, like you just said, Brian, you can already begin to start planning and saying, okay, here are the open dates that I have in 2 years.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And then I can go ahead and start making plans now. And also, it'll help classics. It'll help classics be able to plan in advance and already start, putting whatever finances in place and the promotion and everything in place to say,
hey, these are the 5 teams that have the last Saturday in September open. Which are the 2 that we want to get here for the Classic? Or
Right.
B, can we contact the so-and-so and so-and-so office and get them to move their conference game to here for our Classic?
And it's good that you mentioned that because in terms of pre-planning, there's been hype ever like the Black College Football Hall of Fame Classic.
yes,
They, with their announcement about Grambling playing Tennessee State in 2021, that set Twitter and social media on fire. The fact that Detroit Football Classic, its revival between Southern and Tennessee State, that got the people going. If the sooner you can predetermine these dates, alumni have a better chance of planning travel and lodging. They can maximize how much money they want to get back to their institutions in the event if you predetermine these dates. That's what the Grade of 5 teams do, the Power 5 team do, even with the FCS kickoff to a certain degree. The sooner you can do that and you can negotiate, this stuff, the better for the organizers.
I'm going to take it one step further, Brian Simpkins. We've got schools that have their check games already determined to 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, LSU is playing Grambling and Southern back-to-back years.
2023,
FAMU has
2024.
games, I think, against Miami and Troy and a few other schools scheduled through 23 and 24. If we could go out and schedule our check games so we know we get that $1 million, $800,000, it should be simple for us to schedule some of those smaller games also.
Especially if
3-4
there's
years
a
in
chance
advance.
especially if there's a chance you can get an upset like how Bethune-Cookman has a history of doing against FAU and FIU, not only that looks better on paper, but if you're in the position, if you don't win the MEAC by like a game or so, you can be a strong candidate for an at-large bid to the FCS tournament. Obviously, like I said, we don't know what's about to happen with the Celebration Bowl, but I will tell you this. If the Celebration Bowl does not get extended, things just got that much more serious. FCS tournament auto bids, like I said, you everybody has to be on their P's and Q's if Celebration Bowl does not get extended.
I got one for you fellas. Talked about the Celebration Bowl. And both of you all can chime in on this. And we heard it here, Thursday, Brian, Fulford, when we had Dr. McClellan on.
Right.
His long-term goal is to get the SWAC to become an FBS conference.
Yes. Celebration
Bowl, whether it stays or whether it goes, because of the current model that SWAC uses with the Bayou Classic followed by the championship game, actually fits perfect into the FBS Bowl model.
Yes.
What happens if the SWAC starts getting some of these ancillary games, like the 4th and 5th place MAC team gets to go to some of those type of bowl games, because there are 3 or 4 other new bowl games that are out there that have been proposed.
Right.
What do you think about that, which actually puts the SWAC in a even larger revenue position because honestly, there are only 2 to I believe 30 bowl 20 bowl games.
It's
No,
around
they're
30.
41.
41.
41 bowl games. I'm sorry, 41 bowl games. Of those 41 bowl games, only 3 bowl games have a smaller payout than the Celebration Bowl.
Yes.
So the chances of the SWAC get its number 2 or number 3 team into one of these ancillary bowl games and getting a larger check for the conference are increased. I'll throw that out there for you guys to talk about.
I agree. I agree. And that could also lead to a larger sponsor, a title sponsor for the bowl game. That's extra resources and revenue coming in for, the conferences involved. I definitely took to note Dr. McClellan's proposal about moving up to FBS as a unit, not as an individual, like how FAMU attempted to do in early 2000s, or the proposed Alabama State thing. The sustainability and revenue that you save could build all of the SWAC schools into sponsoring as many sports they need and scholarships that they need to be FBS. It would not be a hard thing to do. They already meet the attendance requirements. That was a very controversial thing when FBS and FCS split back in the 70s. Who would be qualified to be at that level? Kind of like, the Ivy League situation where you only had like 2 members that qualified and everybody else didn't, and they couldn't make up their minds on what they wanted to do. So essentially, you could see one day possibly a CIAAA situation where you have a large contingency of schools who got money and saved up, where they may join Division I FCS. We got to think about the long term and the short term in terms of sustainability, because you can't stay complacent in the same place without innovation. You got to make money best way know how. And COVID, I guess you could say we kind of have to thank COVID for happening, because otherwise a lot of people would not have these discussions ongoing.
Well said, Brian. Yeah, I think COVID-19 has really, in what started out as probably a negative thing, has forced a lot of us and a lot of entities, organizations, even society, as we're seeing in the world, to really think about a lot of things. And many of them will be positive. Hopefully we'll see some changes in society, and we're definitely seeing more awareness. But even in terms of just athletics and the world of athletics and HBCU athletics, the changes that are happening, as you said, would not have probably come about had COVID-19 not entered into the stream. Look, Brian, we appreciate your time. I know we can talk it up forever on this topic, but I wanted to give you maybe a final thought on anything as it relates to this conference, or maybe specifically, let me bring it to this. We always like to talk about dominoes, and that's sort of been the theme that we've been talking about over the last month. I want to give it to you and say, what's the next domino that you're looking for to fall as we think about all of these scenarios that we've talked about over in this show, in this segment? What do you feel like is the next domino that you're looking for?
next domino, 12th SWAC member, it potentially being South Carolina State or Bethune-Cookman. If one of those schools does get approached and they go to the SWAC, the MEAC is in full panic mode. So me personally, just doing the numbers, it's more financially and geographically feasible for Tennessee State to go to the SWAC, and the MEAC can still be a thing, but that 12th member mystery, that weighs very heavily on what's about to happen next.
AD, what I know we've talked, and you've we've been on this box talking a lot. Anything you'd like to add? Any new domino that you'd like to see happen as it relates to the MEAC?
MEAC has to shore up 2 schools. First one being Howard. You got to keep Howard around.
Yep.
And I want to say 2 schools. Got to keep Howard. No ifs, ands, or buts for the MEAC. Then you have to figure out what you're going to do with the South. Whether you're going to concentrate in the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic and leave the South alone, or focus on adding in the South. North Carolina Central is the swing team. They could go north, they can go south. So South Carolina State and Bethune is just, it's too much right now. Those are going to be the teams that have to make the toughest decisions. And so take care of what you have at home. Do you want to go out and start dating again? Or do you want to work it out with your wife at home? That's what the MEAC has to figure out.
I'm going to tell you, Brian, AD, I am more confused about the future of the MEAC than I was 24 hours ago before we did this, because both of you have brought up so many great scenarios and possibilities. I probably, like a lot of people that may be watching this and listening, I mean, this thing can go any number of routes. I guess if I were to say the one domino, and you brought this up, has to do with the Celebration Bowl and what ESPN, if anything, is able to provide. Because I'm sorry, I'm just not of the thought and belief that ESPN is going to be able to, I don't know the relationships, maybe they are. I just don't know if ESPN is going to put enough financial support behind the MEAC to keep the MEAC and do all the things that it needs to do. You know, that's what worries me. So I don't know. I'm really on the fence. I really can't come up with a great statement like what you and AD have done as it relates to the future of the MEAC. But I'm hopeful that we can continue to have these conversations. I know, you know, Brian, and just kind of looking at your scenarios, I know I'd like to see if we can, you know, kind of put everything that you've got on Twitter, you know, continue to publicize that for you, maybe put it into a long form article story, because it is an interesting dynamic, and it's a fascinating thought, your 20-team scenario that creates a future CIAAA, which, as you even mentioned, could turn into 2 different conferences if it chooses to go that route. So there's a lot there, and I know we'll continue talking and carrying on the discussion. Brian, give the people a plug, or let them know where they can find you on social media, and plug, you know, this time is yours to go ahead and plug what you're doing.
Okay, so my Twitter handle, which I use the most often, again, is XIII_MR_UN, D as in dog, ADOG. in my Facebook page for my graphic design company is just GrizzlyBlack Designs, and like I said, it's the first thing that shows up. I'm just honored to have y'all have me on the show. This was my first ever interview on behind the scenes, and like I said, we have to emphasize sustaining our HBCUs and Black sports media. Like I said, I know because I did the story on the history of the Black National Championship and the voting system. BCSN has 2 polls, and I'm a voter on a different poll, Urban Media Today poll. So it's just good that we have these conversations.
Well, definitely. And hopefully, I know we didn't have time to get into it, but maybe in another podcast, we'll get into talking about HBCU merchandising because you have some fascinating thoughts and experiences in that world as well. And I think it's a topic that we need to also kind of get into talking about. So we'll save that one for a different show. That way we can have you on for a different show and a different topic.
Gotcha.
All right. AD, you can find him at BCSN Drew. AD, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, just want to thank Brian for responding to my message that I sent to him yesterday. I told Bryan Fulford that I think having Brian Simpkins on would be a interesting conversation. I did not know it was going to be this interesting because I learned a lot. Listen to a different voice, Brian. I battle Bryan Fulford all day, every day on this stuff. We have stuff we agree on. We have stuff we disagree on. But it's nice to bring a different voice to the debate for the fans of our show. Hopefully, some of your fans will come over to see this, and hopefully, some of our fans will start following you on Twitter and some of the things that you do. So we hope that this is more than a one-hit wonder, as they say.
Well said. All right. For Brian Simpkins, make sure again to follow him on Twitter at XIII, that's 3 I's, _MR_UNDADOG. That's where you can find him, Brian Simpkins, on Twitter. And we definitely look forward to having him back again in some other capacity as we go in the future. And the conversation regarding the MEAC will continue, I'm sure, and we will have more, and we'll see what happens. So for Brian Simpkins and AD Drew, Bryan Fulford, thanks for watching, and we will continue the conversation at a later date.
Holla.
But you stay hard.